Welcome to CEO Check-In. I am in a great mood today. It's a beautiful day here in New York City, and I suddenly have one child at camp and one child off on an outdoor adventure. So mommy time is getting started. You know what I'm talking about. If you're a mom and your kids go off to camp, I remember the first time my kids went off to camp, and it was like, oh, I get a sabbatical, right? After like 7 years of teaching, you get a sabbatical. Well, when your kids get to about 7 to 9 years old, you can get a little sabbatical called camp. And my kids happen to love camp, so they've gone every year, except for last year, of course, because of COVID. So my 13-year-old is so excited to be back at camp. And my 16-year-old is a little too cool for school now, so he is off on an outdoor adventure instead of camp. And I'm going to miss them, but also excited to have more time to see friends, to create new content, to run the 21-day Get a Go Big Mindset Challenge, which we are launching on Friday. Super excited about that. If you haven't checked it out, just go to the link in my bio and click on 21 Days to a Go Big Mindset. It's going to be 21 days of journal prompts so that you can do some reflection on your future, how to have a more powerful mindset, how to find more joy and peace in doing your work. I'm really excited to share all these mindset practices with you. You don't have to have read Go Big Now, but if you have, it'll be even more impactful and not redundant with the book. So I'm excited to share my guest in a few minutes. Molly Ruland is coming on. She is the CEO and founder of Heartcast Media and is going to be joining us from Washington, D.C., where she has a full podcast production studio. And what I love about her business, Heartcast Media, is they're very focused on helping business owners who want to use podcasting as a medium to get a great return on investment in doing that podcast. We have so many women in our community who ask me, should I do a podcast? Should I do a live show like you have? And I had a podcast before. Should I just blog? What's the best way to reach my audience? So I know we're going to learn so much from Molly today about what podcasting can do for a business and just learn more about her journey as an entrepreneur. But before we do, let me just say hi to a few people who've just joined us. And hi, Molly. So glad you're here. You're going to come on in just a minute after I do the Go Big tip. Welcome, W. Dukmak. Welcome, Amy Evans. Welcome, Alex Ryan. Great to have you guys with us. And let me share my little Go Big tip, and then we'll bring Molly on for a great conversation. So my Go Big tip today is find your niche. There are riches in niches is a common thing you hear in the business world. And so many businesses have been able to scale up more quickly by identifying a niche and serving that niche better than anyone else. And I think Molly is an example of that we're going to hear about today. But I can think of several women in the $1 Million Women community who did just that. We had one woman who was selling faux fur that photographers would use to take pictures of newborns. This was a fully online business, and she got to $700,000 in revenues just by selling beautiful props that were, by the way, not without using animals, so faux fur, to put infants on to take high-end pictures of infants. Who would have thought? We have another woman who had a graphic design agency and was finding that it was so competitive having a graphic design agency. She was always up against all these other graphic designers, and she decided to focus on biotech as a niche. And now she is doing extremely well and has a much easier time getting clients and charging top dollar because she's known in that space. There's another woman who decided to really focus in on people who have an issue with their, let's see, what was it? Was it their mobile phones? Oh, I can't remember that one. But my own example, Little Pim, when I was at my prior company, we were focused on children 0 to 6 learning a second language. And that was a great niche to be in because the only way that parents could teach their children a second language between 0 and 6 before we created our multimedia program was to take them to expensive language classes or bring in babysitters who spoke a second language. It was not convenient, it was very expensive. So we chose as our niche kids 0 to 6, and that's the best time for kids to learn a second language. And that is one of the reasons we were able to build that into a multi-million-dollar business, is we sort of own that niche. We became the #1 language teaching program for young kids learning a second language. So find your niche, raise your prices, become the best at it, and beautiful things will happen. And maybe start a podcast. So let's learn more from Molly about that. I had a couple weeks ago and she was telling me her story and I was like, we've got to share you with the CEO check-in community. So I'm really excited to bring you on. Hi, Molly.
Hey there, Julia. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. I love your background with the trees. That's so pretty.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, I actually live in Costa Rica, so the business is based out of Washington, D.C., but I live in Costa Rica.
I love that. We're getting more and more stories like that, right? During the pandemic and post-pandemic. Like people, I feel like now when you go on these Zooms where they say introduce yourself and where are you from, it has to be like, well, I'm from here, but I now live there, or divide my time between these two places.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I had a brick and mortar, beautiful studio in downtown DuPont Circle in DC, but you know, commercial rent is expensive. And when the pandemic hit, I knew it wasn't going to be a fast rebound. So I focused on being the best at remote instead of trying to force something that just wasn't going to work.
I love that. And you get to be in Costa Rica, which is beautiful. I have been there. Yes. Now that makes more sense. Those trees, that's not DuPont Circle trees.
No, definitely not.
So thanks for coming on. I'm really excited to share your story and also how you help business owners. But let's start with your story, because you have a fascinating story of building, you know, a multimedia company that was helping so many different people with marketing and then decided to zero in. So we'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've, as you mentioned, owned a multimedia company for 20 years, you know, amplifying and elevating voices. That's what I've always done, but it was focused more on like local music and art and culture and community. And it was a beautiful life, but it was just not sustainable. You know, I constantly devalued myself. I would volunteer and say, oh, I don't need to make any money. Like, I mean, I was getting it all wrong, you know. And
did you come out of the arts? Because I mean, I was in the arts for many years, and that kind of thinking is often part of the arts world.
You know, well, I grew up in a very artistic family. You know, I could read music, you know, at a young age and played multiple instruments, very big Irish family. So we were always kind of in that lane. And my family that came from Ireland opened up like boarding houses and venues in Pittsburgh and Brooklyn. So it's definitely like in my DNA. But no, I think it was just a lack of business education, right? Like I didn't even realize that I was devaluing myself. I was just always trying to set out to do my mission, which was help artists get in front of more people. And so I did that very successfully, but it can never be successful if it's not sustainable. So
absolutely. Yeah.
You know,
and what were some of the types of people you worked with, just so we can picture it? So when you say artists, were these performing artists? Like, who were they?
All kinds of artists. I mean, I had 160 artists in my booking collective at one point, you know, from graffiti writers and painters to musicians, dancers, performers. I've threw festivals that were, you know, thousands of people. Had a hand in booking a lot of things. I've thrown parties at the Smithsonian. I've, you know, very
Amazing.
Washington, D.C. Yeah, you know, I kind of had my hands in everything. And so if you ask anybody, they would say, oh, you know, she was very successful, but the reality was, you know, I was killing myself. You know, I was pouring from an empty cup. And so
and that's
it really
true of so many businesses. You're in such good company, right? We often start a business because we love to do something, but you know, I feel I was in the same boat when I started Little Pim. I didn't have business training, and I was just doing the best I could with what I knew. And sometimes you can run yourself right into the ground, and people don't even see it, right? Welcome, Aliyah Baker. Just welcoming some new folks. And if you have questions, put them in the comments. If you have questions for Molly specifically about, you know, podcasting. Okay, so you start this business. You're helping all these artists to get promoted and get gigs and make their money, but you're not really making money that's making it sustainable. Then what happened?
Well, the universe kind of sat me down. I had a bunch of health issues and other stuff, and I just sort of, you know, I Marie Kondoed my life. You know, what brought me joy? You know, what part of elevating and amplifying voices did I like, and what did I not like? And then what was left, I crafted a business around that. And so that's when I formed Heartcast Media, because I love being behind the camera. I love marketing. Like, you know, that's what I'm good at. And so I love sitting with people and strategizing and defining what is the goalpost. Like, what are you trying to accomplish with your podcast? Let's start there. Why? You know, what do you know, let's make sure that these things are aligning first, and then we can reverse engineer your goal and make sure that we hit it in 8 episodes or 12 episodes or whatever. So
that's
you know,
fantastic. And often the missing piece for business owners, right? They just run out wanting to start a podcast, but if it's not attached to a goal and maybe a customer you want to attract, we'll get more into that later. So I'm so glad you do that part.
Exactly, because it's super important. And I feel like we live in this like TikTok era where it's like, oh, if you don't get 1 million views, like you don't need 1 million views. Like, what is your goal? Like, are you trying to get new clients? Are you trying to retain your current clients? Is it just brand visibility? Like, if you're, a geo satellite mapping company, and you have a podcast about that, you're not going to get 1 million downloads. But the right person listening to that might give you $1 million contract. So you have to understand your audience and what your target is and not get so caught up in, subscribe on iTunes and like
That's
this.
a great point. And we met through our mutual friend, Joni Swedland, right, who's fantastic and a business coach also in your former area, the DC area. She's in our masterclass program. And I know that what she loves about working with you is you help her think through, from beginning to end, how does this fit into her business? Maybe would you share her story a little bit? Because that's like a concrete, real person that people could learn from.
Yeah, I mean, she's great. She came to me, she wanted to do a podcast about like leadership and women and talking to, amazing women and sharing their stories. And she's done a great job with it. And I know that it's helped turn her business around because she was very intentional with who she's interviewing, who she's, all of that. And so it really makes a difference, Yeah, she's great. I was thinking about
that's a great example, right? She talked through with you, what should the branding be? I think you helped her with that beautiful logo, right?
Everything. So what we do with people is we just take care of everything. We do the setup, we take care of your RSS feed, we design all your branding, we do everything. So all you have to worry about is the content. And then we produce the episodes and we do the transcription and the show notes and the social shares. Like we literally do everything, give you a pile of marketing materials and all your files. So the only thing you have to worry about is the content. You can focus on doing a really great interview and not worry if the thing is recording or if your mic cut off or any of that. So
I think that's music to a lot of entrepreneurs' ears listening, right? Because a lot of people want to start a podcast, but are intimidated by all the different pieces involved. And this is also the benefit of being in a niche like you are, right? And I want to talk next about how did you, go from doing all these things to just the podcasting, because you're able to offer so many more services because you just are focused on that. So maybe dial back a minute to how during the pandemic, because you told me the story the other day, I'd love to share it. You decided to focus on podcasting.
Yeah, well, we had been doing, all podcasting, in the studio, but, like I said, I had to close that brick and mortar down, and I just realized I'm going to innovate and be better at remote than anybody else. So we had a pro Zoom account. We figured out the settings, and we would live engineer them, and, we would lay them out on a custom video template, and just we strive to be better than everybody else in this remote space. And because of that, it worked. We reach more people. We're producing podcasts for people all over the world. We produce for NATO, DC government, Department of Health. We have a client in Brussels right now. So, it's pretty amazing because we're solely focused on that. And part of that is, a lot of times people create like the market instead of the demand. It's like they get it backwards. Like you might have this great idea, but like, do you have customers? Is there a base for that? Like, and I want to work with people that don't need to be convinced that a podcast is a good idea. They just need help crafting it, and people who are invested in their business. If you're just doing a passion podcast, like I'm probably not the one. If you want to do like a true crime podcast, I'm definitely not the one. But if you want to create a business that's going to like increase your, podcast that'll increase your ROI, like that's what I love,
Yes, and I know you start with that conversation with people who reach out to you, right, of what do you want to achieve with this, which is such a great question. But I am curious, so for someone listening who's like, well, I've thought about niching down into one aspect of my business, but it's very scary, the idea of letting go of some of the things I'm already doing. What did that sound like in your head, and how were you able to make that transition and to kind of get up the gumption to just focus in on this one thing?
It was actually surprisingly easy. I did a deep dive on Tom Bilyeu's podcast, and he interviewed all these people, and the recurring things that I kept hearing was the greatest mistake you'll ever make is not knowing when to stop, and that just kept, because it's like, it's not working. Like how much more evidence do I need that it's not working? But I'm really good at what I do, and I'm smart, and I'm capable, and I have this experience, but what I'm doing isn't working. So for me, it was kind of easy to walk away from a company I built for 19 years, which sounds crazy, but like...
Yeah, it sounds like it takes a lot of courage, but like you said, the evidence just was not there, right? Or the evidence was there that you needed to change something.
And it just, it's about changing the mindset. From there I read, over 50 books in the last 2 years. I'm finishing yours, so I feel like I've been listening. We've been talking all week because you've been in my car and in the, kitchen and everything else, but this idea, and I think this, I've been super excited about this because, you don't need 1 million people to hear your message, right? Like me listening to your book this last 2 weeks, like it clicked something back in my head. Like I've set a goal to hit 1 million by 2022, and we're on track to do that. I want to be in that small percentage of women that gets over 1 million. I've met an amazing woman down here. We've partnered up. We're doing a retreat in February in Costa Rica called F the Hustle to get women to start working hard, smarter, not harder, and how to raise capital and how to make money, which is why I love your book. You talk about the different types of funding and what's the difference between this money and that money, and not all money is good. And I just wish there was more women in this space, talking, okay, imposter syndrome, fine, but how do you make money? And
right?
So
I know that's the conversation we're all ready for now. So thank you. I love that it's resonating with you, and you're 100% right. We don't have to sell to everyone. In fact, one of the best things I ever learned when I was studying marketing was if you're marketing to everyone, you're marketing to no one, right? If someone says, oh, who's your customer? Oh, everyone would love what I do, right? That's a terrible answer, because if you're selling to everyone, you'll never have enough money to plaster all those markets, right, with your marketing. And you can't get really good at speaking the language of your customer if it's too many different customers. So who is your customer? Let's model this. Who is your customer, Molly?
Businesses, brands, nonprofits, government agencies, and think tanks. If you have a mission and you have a message and you need help crafting it and getting it out, I'm your woman, but definitely people who understand that it's an investment and are willing to make that investment.
So businesses, let's back up. So businesses, think tanks, what was the other one? Government agencies? Brands, in general, really, business focused. We've been doing a lot of work with law firms, because they like our attention to detail. They're really worried about saying the wrong thing, so we help there. Doing stuff with the government a lot. We do a lot of online learning modules for them. Yeah, it sounds like your business is going like gangbusters. What was your growth over the last year or so? Because a lot of businesses shrunk during the pandemic, but it sounds like because of your decision to become the #1 remote podcasting company that you were able to grow.
Well, I'm super proud to say that our revenue increased 200% from 2019 to 2020, and we're up 25% this year.
Yes,
so we should hit
awesome.
that. Yeah, and I mean, this is
hit that $1 million mark in 2022.
100%.
Out there into the universe. I'm going to reverse engineer that.
Exactly. We'll hit 500,000 this year. For me, it's really just understanding don't devalue yourself. Don't charge too low. Every time you charge too low, you close the door on another woman. Stop doing that. You know what I mean? You just have to stop. And people will pay you what you're worth. You just got to be in the right audience. You don't go on Tinder looking for the love of your life, right? You got to know your audience. You got to know where you're at. And I think, if I could just encourage more women, just like you have, to charge more, and don't, normalize.
To know your worth, right? To know your worth. I was just working on this morning with a coaching client, really right before this CEO check-in. And for her, I think the issue was not really knowing what her service was worth to her customer. And so for anyone listening who's yeah, maybe I'm not charging enough, or maybe it's time for me to raise my rates, a great way to get yourself there, other than doing mindset work with that, which I'm sure Molly and I would both highly recommend. Read mindset books, including Go Big Now, my new book, and other books about mindset. But then also to really document the impact you've had on your clients with the dollars and cents. Because when you start writing down, oh wow, this person's making another $50,000 or $100,000 from something I did for them, you're going to feel a lot more confident in that next meeting saying, hey, my last client just made another $50,000, so this is worth it. Have you done that, Molly? Have you looked into what your clients have made from having a podcast?
For sure, because they all come back. They all come back and they all renew and they're all very happy, right? So I know that it's working. If it wasn't working, they wouldn't keep spending that money. I saw this thing in a Facebook group yesterday that said if you're winning 60 to 70% or more of your proposals, your rates are too low.
Interesting. Okay. I don't know if I agree with that, but I do recommend to my coaching clients to do a survey of the competition and see where you sit, because that's what your customers are doing, is comparing you to everyone else. So why wouldn't we, every few months look at what other people are charging? And if it looks like everyone's charging, less, then that's your sign. And then there's also stages of business, right? Like the coaching client I was talking to this morning is in her 3rd year of business. And I was like,
Right.
look, you're not a toddler anymore, right? Like you've been doing this for 3 years. You're not the cheap and cheerful solution. You are a proven company. So it's time to have rates that reflect that. Does that resonate at all?
Oh, for sure. I mean, we didn't start off, charging what we charge now. I was doing podcast one-on-one classes for free, and then I started charging $200 a person. Now I charge $1,500 for 2 hours. But I had to get there. I had to develop the lesson. I had to show that, like, I've done this. I have experience. So when you hire me, you're hiring the same person that produces podcasts for NATO, right? So that's what you're getting, is that value in my experience. And I mean, people, there's always going to be people that charge more, and there'll be people that charge less. I think having employees changes that math, because if you're just a solo entrepreneur, you can say, oh, it's this. But if you're actually paying somebody for those hours, you start to realize, no, you have to factor your cost of goods. What does it actually cost you to produce that content? And then what is your profit margin? And I don't think a lot of people actually do that math. I mean,
well, that's part of the business training, right? That you and I were both missing initially, but once we knew how to do it, I think that's part of what allows businesses to scale, is to know how to look at your margins, what's working, what's not working. Tell us about your team, because so many women in our community are building their first team or trying to figure out how big a team do I need. How did you decide who to hire, and how big is the team now?
For sure. Well, I started with an on-site engineer that was local, for sure, because I didn't want to be in the studio. I needed to be selling. But I trained everybody initially on the job, and then I let them do it better than me because they're better at it. But the first thing I did after I hired Matt was I sat down and I made a list of the things that I wanted someone to do, because I think in hiring, people are like, oh, I want an editor who can post on social media and write content. I'm like, that's 3 different people.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, good luck with that. And so I started making a list and creating different buckets of what chores would fall under. And then once I made that list, which bucket was bigger and which bucket was going to make me the most amount of money first. So the first person I hired was a video editor, So then from there we did, a web developer and a content writer and then an SEO and graphic designer, So that way we started.
Does that give you just way greater confidence when you're pitching, knowing that you have like a team of experts behind you?
For sure. And, it allows me to still, like, I can still be the altruistic, loving, caring person that I am, because if, like, I know somebody needs help with a website and they can't afford it, I can just say, hey, you know what, I'll build you one for free, but then I don't devalue myself in business. So it gives me an opportunity to be that person that I want to be without it costing me. And for me, all of my staff are full-time, so they're all over the world, Dubai, Philippines, India, and Kenya. But everybody is on a full-time salary. Everybody gets paid Friday, no matter what, whether they did 2 podcasts or 20 podcasts. And I think that's the difference, right? Like, everybody wants to go to Fiverr or hire somebody part-time. Like, you have to give people stability. You can't expect people to show up for you whenever you need them if they have to go find ways to feed themselves. So,
and then also, how can you be offering these services to your clients without knowing you've got really top people there at the ready to deliver? And there is a way in which getting a team suddenly motivates you to get new clients, right? Like once you know you have those mouths to feed, you're like out there hustling in a different way.
Yeah, because payroll is real. Payroll is super real, which also changes, your willingness to devalue yourself. You're like, no, I'm not going to offer this discount when nobody asks for it. I'm just going to keep moving. I'm going to get in front of more people. I'm going to, and I focus on building.
This is all part of the Go Big mindset, right? Which is like, how do you imagine your company in a way where it's a team of people getting well paid, doing work they love, everybody in the right roles, right? And you're out there making the deals, making sure your company is top of mind. That is what allows companies to go big. So you are doing it, Molly.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I love building systems. Like, I love Trello, I love Acuity, I love Zapier, so I focus on building a really good framework for them, and then I stay out of the way. My goal is to work the least amount of hours a day as possible. I used to wear my hustle.
Work smart, not hard, like you said, for your retreat. And having the right systems, especially when you have a global team, has got to be key to that.
Yeah, because we're producing a ton of content, but I built the systems and it works, and I see it moving through the system, and if there's an issue, I find out. But I never get complaints because I built the system the right way. The client always knows what's going on. The team always knows what's going on. It works. You know what I mean? I constantly tweak it and adjust it. And I it's one of those things. A lot of times in business, you think someone's going to come save you or someone else is going to build this system or someone else, right? And you got to know when to like hold them and fold them. Like you're better off learning Zapier than you are trying to produce your own podcast. Like audio engineering, graphic design, copywriting, these are separate skill sets. And now you're trying to do 5 different things to produce a podcast. No, you're so much better off like learning Zapier. Spend an afternoon, 3 hours learning Zapier and automate things in your life. That has so much more value,
but when it's time
right?
to do a podcast, I'd love you to share with people watching, like how would someone who's watching, who's thinking about doing a podcast but not really sure, and we've got a bunch of new people joining us. Hi, Alyssa. Hi, Darius. Hi, We're Leftist. Hi, Living Are Inspired. Very happy to have you with us. Humbliness, Rabia. Thanks for being with us. Yeah, and we're talking to Molly about how she built her podcasting business, which is fully remote with a team all over the world. She had 200% growth since 2019. We're so excited for you, and is on her way to being one of our $1 million women. But what I'd love to know is if someone's listening who's like, well, is a podcast next for me? What are some of the questions they could ask themselves to start to answer that?
Well, where are their gaps in their marketing? Like, what do they think a podcast would do for them? Like, let's pretend they're doing it. It's great. What does that actually mean? Do they have more business? Are they famous? Are they trying to be on New and Noteworthy on iTunes? Like, what's really the goal? And then I would say, there's always a great way to craft a podcast to reach your intended audience, with a business. So it's just a matter of, are you willing to invest that money in your marketing, And then working with.
How do they know? I mean, there may not be a real answer to this, but people do ask me, like, well, how will I know if it's worth it? How do I know if I'll get the ROI? I mean, I don't think there's an actual magic answer to that, but how do you handle that?
Well, I mean, the first thing is to have a meeting and sit down with me, right? Because even though I'm not in the weeds with the production, I oversee and I'm always there for like a consultation meeting. And so the first thing I would do is like, let's spend 30, 40 minutes on a call and figure out, what's the goal, what's the intention, what is your business, who is your ideal client? So then I can start to imagine, and visualize, what does this podcast actually look like? Okay, I'm an insurance person. How do we make that interesting and compelling and also hit your target of getting new clients, right? So it's really usually in that discovery call, we dial in on like a mission that they can get excited about, where it's like, okay, these dots are connecting now. I get it, and I know what to do. Because I think a lot of times people think a podcast is just them like pontificating on a microphone about themselves, and they're
just like a place to rant or
that.
something, right? But in fact, most podcasts that are successful have gone through this process you're talking about being very strategic of who am I trying to reach, what kind of guests am I bringing on, what does success look like. So that's great that you get on the phone with your potential customers and help them think about that. That in itself is super valuable. And where is Heartcast Media going, Molly? Like, where do you want to go in the next couple of years? Do you want to just keep, helping to make more amazing podcasts? Are you expanding to anything new? Tell us what the next couple of years look like.
I just really want to be a full service suite for podcast production. So we're going to include advertising and matching services for people to get on other podcasts. So we're really excited about that. And really it's just about steady growth, adding more clients, adding more staff. We are building a new studio in DC in the next couple of months. Big announcement.
Awesome. That's exciting. And that's great. So looking back, your decision to niche down, how do you feel about that?
Oh, it was the best decision I've ever made. I love saying no. It's my favorite thing.
But I bet at first it was hard when people were coming to you for the things you used to do.
For sure. And in the beginning of Heartcast, I was creating custom packages, which is like, never again. Like, this is what we do. You know what I mean? This is what we do. If you want it, you can get it. You go to McDonald's, you get a Big Mac. You don't have them custom. This is just what we do. I can recommend you to other people.
And I have to say, people want that, right? Because if they have to figure it all out, that's more work for them. Whereas you're the expert. You know what it should look like. So we teach this in Masterclass too, how to productize your services so that it's easy for people to know what to buy, how much it should cost. And I think people prefer it. Don't you?
For sure, because it's like, and then if you do custom work, something's going to get messed up because your team isn't used to custom work. So they're going to do it the way they always do it, and it's going to get messed up. And then you've probably given them a different price, and then it's going to require more work and time from you. It never works out. So it's like, listen, if you do this, it will work. And if you do this 8 times, it will work as long as you're strategic. Like I have one client, who had a business in the beginning of the pandemic. She wasn't sure if it was going to make it. So we branded a podcast for her in the same colors and fonts, but separate from the business. And she said after doing 12 episodes, they have so many contracts that, you know, she can't keep up with signing them. And it was 100% from the podcast. What about like a month
That's
in,
awesome.
she said.
That's amazing. What sector was she in? What kind of work was that?
Food packaging, CPG and food packaging.
Very cool.
And she relied on events. And so like a month into it, she said, I don't know who to get. Like, I think I can get this famous guy. I said, you know, famous guy is not going to do anything for your numbers. You're trying to reach like the COOs and the higher ups, the C-level people at these packaging companies and these brands. And right now, the Food Expo in California has been canceled because of the pandemic. So the person who runs that whole thing has more time. Interview her or him, probably a her, because she knows the COO of Whole Foods. She knows the, you know what I'm saying, the distribution.
Oh my God, such great advice. I love that.
Right?
Did she get her on the show?
She did. And then within like a month, she got sponsored by Frito-Lay because she got in front of the right people and interviewed the right people, and they saw how thorough and intelligent and capable she is and personable. So of course they all wanted to work with her. So I mean, it literally turned her business from like possibly shutting down in the beginning of the pandemic to booming right now. Like,
oh my God. Well, you must feel so good about that. I mean, thank you for how you're helping all these entrepreneurs to reinvent as well, because during the pandemic, I have a feeling she's not the only business you saved from some pretty dire months of not meeting payroll.
100%. And that was a tough investment for her too. Like, I don't know, I might just be giving you my last bit of money, right? But I think this is going to work. And I said, I know it will, you know, if you follow the formula. And so, yeah, it feels awesome to know that, like, you know, I was a part of that. Like, it works. It's very validating. Like, I'm not just like, you know, repeating what I read off of Tony Robbins' book. It's like, no, man, this works.
You've seen this work. Well, I love what you're up to, and I know you're going to help so many more businesses. How can people find you if they want to follow you personally, follow Hardcast Media? What's the best way to find you, Molly?
For sure. I mean, you can send me a DM on any of my, you know, any of the platforms, Molly at Hardcast Media. You know, we're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you know, LinkedIn, although I really avoid LinkedIn like the plague. But
you got your favorites. It's all right. So Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Those are the best places to find you. Is it at Hardcast Media or is it at Molly Ruland or both?
It's at Hardcast Media. And, you know, if anybody is listening and they want to do, like, you want to set up a call with me and you want to talk about your idea, like, I'm always happy to do that with people and help flush it out. And maybe at the end of the call, you say, actually, this isn't the right move, or you'll say, hey, this is great. I'm going to call you in a month, whatever, you know? So I'm happy to do that if any of your listeners, you know.
That's
and I
a great offer, and I know a lot of people just don't even know where to start with the podcast. So I'm sure you'll have some people taking you up on that. And thank you so much for coming on to share your story. I love what you're doing and how you were able to, you know, take a lot of lemons and turn them into lemonade. And I know this is just the beginning of so many great things for Hardcast Media. So congratulations.
Thank you so much, Julia. I really, you know, you've been such a big part of this, like, reawakening that I'm feeling in these last couple weeks too. So thank you, truly. I really appreciate it.
I'm so happy I get to be in your car with you in Costa Rica. Take me to nice places. I'm listening to my audiobook.
I'll record something so you can hear yourself in the.
I want to see some monkeys. I've been to Costa Rica. They were like really cool monkeys and great coffee. So anyway, enjoy and thanks again for sharing your story with us. I loved having you on.
Thank you so much, Julia.
Bye, Molly. Have a great day. I love how Molly was able to, during the pandemic, just stop and think about, okay, what am I going to do now? Like, I had to shut down my studio. I'm sure this resonates with so many people who are in the events business, the sports business, the entertainment business. We saw so many businesses, food, travel affected. But there's often a piece of your business that you can still run, even in a dire situation like this. And that's what we saw a lot of businesses doing that had multiple revenue streams. That's why we're always promoting in the $1 Million Women community, multiple revenue streams, because you never know which is the one you're going to need to amp up in an emergency like this, or maybe for a lifestyle question. Sometimes women, you know, have children and then realize I don't want to do so much face-to-face work, or they move across the country and realize I want a business that's more portable, more online. So make sure to have multiple revenue streams and to think about what's the niche that I could go after where I could really own it and have a product or service that's the go-to number one thing that everybody wants in that niche. Thanks so much for joining us for CEO Check-In. You can listen to my CEO Check-Ins and my Go Big tips on my Instagram TV. We also load them up to my YouTube channel, which is Julia Pimsleur Coach. And if you're looking to work on your own Go Big mindset, like do some of the work that Molly has done and that I have done, feel free to join us for the 21 Days to a Go Big Mindset, which is starting on Friday, July 9th. It just takes about 15 minutes a day of journaling, and you will feel some very big shifts and changes. I will see you next week. Until then, stay brave and go big.